You know what, guys? This is a subject that I really didn't want to make a video on because it really upsets me, and I really have to be careful of what I'm saying. And of course, I'm not going to mention any names because, as I've said many times before, the purpose of this channel is never to get someone attacked on social media, on any social media platform. But we've all heard these moronic people out here going around always attacking people, other gamers, and using any excuse they can to label them as poor. First of all, there's nothing wrong with being a gamer that's poor. Most people who game, a lot of the, well, I'm not going to say most people because I don't have the stats, but from my personal experience in my personal life, it's nothing to walk into a common class person's household and see a PlayStation in the entertainment center. Yeah, believe it or not, poor people do try to buy some luxuries and try to get some enjoyment out of life. Oh my, let's arrest them. Let's take them to the scaffold immediately. Oh boy. And secondly, a lot of these people making these comments, they're responding to YouTubers who obviously aren't poor. These people have all sorts of expensive gadgets in the background on their channels. And a lot of them aren't people who review things. So they aren't, I'm not talking about, because a lot of people who review things, especially the big ones, they're given a lot of stuff. But even them, even those people, they have to buy a lot of the stuff they own. They don't get, they aren't given everything. This idea that these people are poor, who are on, they got to be responding to the YouTubers because they don't know what you and I think. I'm not a huge YouTuber, and I haven't even commented on the price hike of anything. Of any graphics cards or anything. So they're not talking about me. They're not talking about the little guy. They're talking about people who have channels who are big enough, who have a broad voice on YouTube, who obviously aren't poor, but they're complaining about the price of the newest graphics card. I think it's the 40 series, the RTX 40 series. And obviously these people aren't poor, but you have a couple of people, one in particular whose comments really got, it's really getting covered. But there've actually been a couple of people who have made similar comments saying that people need to stop complaining, they're poor, and you need to go out and get an extra job or whatever. How is it logical to say that these people are complaining because they're poor when, if you look at their channels long enough and you look at the gadgets that they have and things like that, it's obviously, obvious, excuse me, I'm upset, man. It's obvious that they are not poor. So these comments that are used to attack poverty or the class of people in this country that lives in an impoverished state, these comments only serve one purpose, and that is to self-aggrandize. Like, look at me, I'm not poor. I can afford the price of the new 40 series. Oh my, look at me, I'm so great. I'm richer than you. The truth of the matter is, most people in this country are just a few months away from, if they went unemployed, if they didn't have a job, if for whatever reason things got so bad, they were unemployed for 3 or 4 months, they'd be well on their way to losing everything. And that's the lucky people, because there are a lot of people who look like they have a lot of money, who look like they're financially well off, who look like they might be the types of people who save money and have a few thousand in the bank, that don't. There are people out here who are living in expensive apartments, expensive houses. They're driving expensive cars. And, not everybody. There are some people out here who are really trying to make it day to day, and they're not out here doing that. They don't have an expensive car, but they're still in a state where if they lost their job, they would lose everything. Those people would just lose it sooner. But then you have some people who, they have all the things that I just said, the expensive apartment or whatever, and they do save money. You have those people as well. They're saving money. But even those people, if they went too long without being, without employment, and they had to tap into their savings to, pay their bills, they would lose everything. If they lose their car, they lose it all. In this world, the United States is known as the credit card nation. We are the nation who use our credit cards more than any other nation in the world. You're using those credit cards for a reason because many Americans are living beyond their means. Because if you weren't living beyond your means, you wouldn't need a credit card. You could pay cash for everything. Who would volunteer to pay? For example, you buy a TV. Let's say the TV costs $2,000. If you pay payments on that television, you're going to end up paying more than $2,000. So who would volunteer to do that? If you go out here and you buy a car, you're going to pay, I'm not going to use a car because that's kind of unfair. You can really understand, except for used cars, you can understand why a lot of people purchase a car. So we'll scratch that. And I understand why because some people have bad experience with used cars where the car keeps breaking down. I've actually had friends who've done that and they just got tired of it and they just went out and bought a new car. So we'll take that off. That's a big ticket item. We understand why people would use credit to buy a car. And by the way, to be perfectly clear, I'm not attacking people who use credit cards to, buy luxuries. That's not the point here. The point here is that much of our lifestyle is supported by credit. We buy a nice house on credit. We buy a nice car. And when I say nice, I'm not talking about like necessarily a Mercedes. I'm just saying just a nice car. It could be a Honda or a Mazda or whatever. We buy these things on credit. When we furnish our house, when you buy your first house, you normally go out, especially if you want some, if you don't want to do the IKEA thing, if you don't want to furnish your whole house with IKEA furniture, and not knocking that if you do, but even if you do that, most people are going to use credit because in order for them to pay cash, in order for them to take, let's lowball. Let's say they bought a small house. That's a young couple. In order for them to furnish that small house with everything that it needs, they're going to end up spending multiple thousands of dollars. They're going to end up spending anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 to do that, depending on how far they want to go. Maybe they got a nice little yard outside and they want to put a grill out there and they want to put some lawn furniture out there, So they're going to do that even if they have, let's say it ends up costing $15,000. Even if they have the $15,000, they more than likely want to save that $15,000 for a rainy day. Let's say they both end up losing their jobs. Okay, let's say we go into a deep recession and they both end up losing their jobs. We just saw that happen where both breadwinners in the household lost their jobs. Okay, so they both lose their jobs and they've got that $15,000. They owe on all that furniture. Now, of course, what's the first thing they're going to do when the walls start closing in? They're going to forget about paying the payments on that furniture if they got any sense. The main priority is the roof over their heads. So for a while, they may pay the car note. They may even pay some credit card payments or whatever for a while. Eventually, that money is going to become less and less and less and less. And you know how life is. Let's say an emergency pops up. Let's say someone dies in the family. I'll use my own personal experience as an example. Not long ago, we had a situation in my household where we ended up, due to an emergency that popped up, we ended up having to spend around $6,000 on an emergency to fix a problem that was, going on in our personal lives. As soon as we took care of that problem, we had a very dear and close family member to die abroad. So now we just spent somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 to take care of one problem. Now we've got another problem. When it was all said and done, by the time we got plane tickets, because we're buying the plane tickets all of a sudden, they're expensive. And by the time we did that, flew abroad, by the time we got, a hotel room, because, I don't like to stay with family members. We did for a while, but eventually we ended up getting a hotel room because it's just a lot more comfortable. And by the time we finished, purchasing food and things of that nature, though we did have a lot of family members cooking for us, but still, you're not going to eat everything at your family member's house. So when it was all said and done, we're looking at both emergencies ended up costing somewhere, we'll round it up and say around $12,000. Life doesn't stop just because you're unemployed. Life isn't going to just say, hey, you only have about $15,000 in savings and you're unemployed now? Okay, we'll hold off on the life emergencies until you can get another job. until you can get back on your feet. We all know that's not how life works. There can come a time in your life when it seems like it's just raining problems. You know, you live long enough, you'll see it. Seems like everything can just hit you all at once. That's the reason why, you hear a lot of people say, man, things are going so well, I'm kind of scared. I'm kind of wondering when are the problems going to start hitting me, because that's just how life is. Life has a lot of good. Life also has a lot of bad. And oftentimes we end up finding ourselves in situations where we have to handle some things to get our lives back on course. And a lot of times those things that we have to handle, they cost money. And a lot of times people don't have the extra cash. Some people don't have the cash at all. Some people have the cash to handle those problems, but they prefer to use their credit cards because they don't want to spend their cash, because you never know when you're going to need that cash. You never know when you're going to be in dire straits financially. And cash rules everything. You never know when you're going to be in a situation when you're not going to have income coming in, and you're going to end up having to tap into your savings just to live life, just to keep a roof over your head, to try to hang on to your cars as long as you can, to try to keep your kid in that private school that they go to and all their friends go to as long as you can. Even if you're lucky enough to be a homeowner, at that point, you're unemployed, you have no income coming into the house, you're not even going to be able to qualify for a home equity loan. Okay, guys, we're not going to drag this video out for long. Let's just put it this way. Let's discuss some hard facts here. Let's get to the nitty gritty. As far as common class citizens in the United States, most of us are poor. We're just poor on different levels. You have the guy or the woman at the bottom who works paycheck to paycheck, and then you have everyone above them. And as you go higher up the poverty scale, some of us have a little bit more than the people up below us. And when I say we have a little bit more, I'm also speaking of savings. We have more money saved. As you go up higher and higher, you start getting into the classes where people even have investments, they have mutual funds, they have stocks and things of this nature. Okay. The only difference between the rest of us and the people who live at the bottom living paycheck to paycheck is that it would take us longer to lose our stuff. That's it. Because we have something they don't have, which is assets. As you go up the scale, us poor people, we have more and more assets. We have more things to latch on to. When that truck pulls up to the person living paycheck to paycheck to take the stuff out of their house, it'll be a smaller truck. They would lose the roof over their head probably the following month because they're living paycheck to paycheck. We would be able to stay in our house longer. We'd be able to hold on to our stuff longer. But if we don't get that stream of income coming in, and especially if life emergencies, which continue regardless of whether or not we have a job, because life doesn't care. Just like that person on the bottom living paycheck to paycheck, we would begin to lose everything. When the truck pulls up to our house to take everything out of our house, it'll be a bigger truck and it'll be more stuff. They'll be taking that $5,000 PC out of your house, or that $3,000, $2,000, whatever it is. They'll be taking the Xboxes out of your house. They'll be taking those classic gaming systems out of your house. They'll be taking your vast library that you've built over the years out of your house. They'll be taking that big screen TV out of your house. They'll be taking that theater system out of your house. They'll be taking everything out of your house. It'll just take longer before you get to that point. But without an income, all of us are going to meet the same fate. We're just going to meet it on a different date, because after you've maxed out all of your credit cards, you then have to start dipping into those assets. You have to start dipping into your savings. And when that runs out, then you're going to have to start dipping into your investments that you probably only intended to dip into once you retired. But you're not going to have a choice. Throw in a life emergency. You've used all your credit cards, so you don't have that anymore. You're not going to be able to get any more credit cards. And if you're still in your house, at some point, you and the mortgage company are going to have a problem with each other, because you're going to stop making your mortgage payment. Depending on where you live, it's going to be a little bit harder for them to take the house from you, but you will slowly see yourself working to that point where if things don't turn around, they will be able to take that house from you regardless of where you live. So at that point, a home equity loan is certainly going to be out of the question. Before the actual date that you get kicked out of your house, you can safely say that for months before that day, you didn't really even own your house anymore. The bank owned it. They were just trying to get you out of the house, okay? And then let's say all of your things, you're fortunate enough to find somewhere to store them. In order to get things straightened out and get yourself back on track, you decide to file a Chapter 7. That's when you'll really find out how poor you really are, because what you're gonna find is that when you go to court, all those things that you once surrounded yourself with and looked around at to think that you're rich, to think that you're not poor on some level, that's when they're gonna tell you that all those things, even the smallest, most minute things, watches, games, consoles, PCs, chairs, sofas, the whole, you name it, clothes. That's when they're gonna tell you, hey, before this is all said and done, you need to sell that stuff. And if you were fortunate enough to still have any assets left, they're also gonna look at that. You're not gonna be able to keep that. You're not gonna be able to keep the mutual fund. There may be certain things as far as like, if you have certain types of retirement plans or whatever, they won't be able to touch those things, depending on what kind of retirement plan it is. But more than likely, those would be things that you couldn't even tap into without paying, without getting hit with a very high tax rate. So those things were pretty much off the table anyway. But any of your other assets, if you manage to have any money left in the bank, any mutual funds left, any stocks left, all that stuff is going to be put on the chopping block. So when it's all said and done, in other words, you were poor, but when the courts get through with you, they're going to make sure you're even poorer, because the way they look at it is, if we're going to help you get out of this situation, you're going to have to give up some of the things that you have. You're not going to just tell these companies that you're not going to pay them through a Chapter 7 and then you walk away with your personal assets. No, it doesn't work like that. Now, it works like that for rich people because the rules and the laws are written different. So don't worry about what you see rich people do and what you see companies do when they file bankruptcy. That's completely different. Remember, you're a common class citizen here in the United States. You're a commoner. You're not on their level. So don't look at them. The laws are different. They're literally written different. So it's not going to work out the same way for you. Like it or not, America does have an economic tier system. And for most of us, we're nothing but yeoman class citizens. Some of us have it better than others. The yeoman class has it better than the serving class. That's where we're at, whether you like it or not. None of us are a part of the super wealthy. None of us can afford to lose our stream of income and sustain our life as it is right now, even those of us who are fortunate. In America, we're so into hating the poor, mostly to prove that we're not poor. We try to prove we're not poor by displaying our hatred of the poor. Look at me, I'm not poor, see, I hate the poor, which is why we're also always trying to keep up with the Joneses. We're always trying to keep up with our neighbors because we want to prove that we're not poor. When the truth of the matter is that most of us are just a couple of tragedies and a couple of job losses away from being homeless. But hey, look, guys, I'm sorry for going on so long. I just really wanted to vent. I wanted to get this out of my system. Some of the things that's being said on social media is it's astounding to me. It boggles the mind, man. I mean, really, the level of ignorance is just astonishing. And these people act like they don't realize that, especially if you have a high subscriber count, that many of the people listening to your channel that are faithful subscribers, faithful listeners, probably even share your video, think you're the greatest thing since sliced cheese, they may be poor. And then suddenly they find themselves sitting there listening to you talk down about the poor. The idea that an impoverished person would be sitting around thinking about the high cost of an RTX 30 series or 40 series graphics card is ridiculous. So talk to the people that you're actually talking to and keep impoverished people out of your mouth, because you're not talking to impoverished people. They're not out here worrying about the increase in the price of an RTX 30 series or 40 series graphics card. A $50 price hike in the PlayStation 5. Oh, you can't afford that because you're poor. Ha ha ha. Are you complaining about the increase in the price of a 40 series graphics card in comparison to the 30 series? Oh yeah, you're complaining because you're poor. Ha ha ha. Why don't you just talk to the people that you're talking to? Because, like I said, we're all poor on some level, but most of the people that you're talking to are poor on your level or close to it, or maybe they're even just above your level or just under your level, but they're not the poorest people in the country. You know, those people who would not even be thinking about the price of a 40 series graphics card because they're not going to buy it. They're not even going to look at it. So talk to the people that you're actually talking to, which are people who are more economically just like you. If you can't articulate your thoughts without throwing poor people under the bus, you know, if you have to come up with anything, no matter how idiotic it is, just to try to make your point, then maybe you should be in the conversation. Because some of these same people you're out here talking down to are probably finding all kinds of ways to come up with enough money to contribute a couple of dollars to your Patreon account. So I know I keep saying I'm going to end it, and I am going to go ahead and end it, but I do want to say this before I go. If you're someone who's suffering economically or you're struggling economically, keep your head up and don't let these ignorant people on social media get to you. All right, guys, stay safe.